Question 1. What factors determine the appropriate handling of patient case studies within the Anhui Medical University entrance examination to ensure both academic integrity and patient confidentiality? Option A. Adherence to Anhui Medical University's specific admission regulations, national Chinese laws on patient data protection and medical ethics, and the principle of anonymizing or pseudonymizing patient information. Option B. The availability of patient records from local hospitals without considering consent or anonymization protocols. Option C. The perceived difficulty of the case studies and the need to impress examiners with realistic scenarios. Option D. General ethical principles of medical practice without specific reference to Chinese regulations or university guidelines. The correct answer is A. Adherence to Anhui Medical University's specific admission regulations, national Chinese laws on patient data protection and medical ethics, and the principle of anonymizing or pseudonymizing patient information. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for prospective medical students in Anhui Medical University regarding the ethical and regulatory considerations of patient data privacy during their entrance examination process. This is professionally challenging because the integrity of the examination must be maintained while simultaneously upholding patient confidentiality, a cornerstone of medical ethics and a legal requirement. Mismanagement of patient data could lead to severe ethical breaches, legal repercussions, and damage to the university's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests. The correct approach involves understanding and strictly adhering to the Anhui Medical University's specific regulations and national Chinese laws governing medical education admissions and patient data protection. This means ensuring that any patient information used for examination purposes is anonymized or pseudonymized to the highest degree possible, with explicit consent obtained where necessary and appropriate, and that access is strictly limited to authorized personnel involved in the examination. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of patient autonomy, confidentiality, and the legal framework established by Chinese health and education authorities, safeguarding both the examination's validity and the rights of individuals whose data might be hypothetically referenced. An incorrect approach would be to use identifiable patient information without proper consent or anonymization. This is a direct violation of patient privacy rights and ethical medical practice, and likely contravenes specific regulations within Anhui Medical University's admission guidelines and national data protection laws in China. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the need for patient data security altogether, assuming it is not relevant to an academic entrance exam. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the ethical responsibilities inherent in the medical profession, and a failure to comply with established protocols for handling sensitive information, even in an academic context. A third incorrect approach would be to rely on outdated or non-specific data protection guidelines, failing to consult the most current and relevant regulations applicable to Anhui Medical University and the specific context of the entrance examination. This shows a lack of diligence and a potential for non-compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical principles and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant ethical codes and legal statutes applicable to the situation, in this case, Anhui Medical University's admission policies, Chinese medical ethics and data privacy laws. 2. Assessing the potential risks and benefits of each course of action, particularly concerning patient privacy and examination integrity. 3. Consulting with relevant authorities or experienced colleagues if ambiguity exists. 4. Implementing the chosen course of action with meticulous attention to detail and documentation. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows that an applicant for Anhui Medical University possesses excellent academic scores, but has a documented history of minor disciplinary infractions during their secondary school years. The admissions committee is deliberating on whether to proceed with the application. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the committee to ensure a fair and thorough evaluation? Option A. Admit the applicant based solely on their high academic scores, disregarding the disciplinary record as irrelevant to academic potential. Option B. Automatically reject the application due to the presence of any disciplinary infractions, regardless of their nature or recency. Option C. Expedite the admission process for this applicant to meet enrollment targets without a detailed examination of their disciplinary history. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire academic and disciplinary record, seeking to understand the context of the infractions, the applicant's subsequent conduct, and any evidence of personal growth before making a decision. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire academic and disciplinary record, seeking to understand the context of the infractions, the applicant's subsequent conduct, and any evidence of personal growth before making a decision. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a prospective student, who has a strong academic record but a history of minor disciplinary infractions during their secondary education, is being considered for admission to Anhui Medical University. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic excellence with its responsibility to assess the holistic character and potential of applicants. Admissions committees must navigate the ethical imperative of fairness and non-discrimination, while adhering to the university's stated admission criteria and the relevant regulations governing higher education admissions in China. This requires a nuanced judgment that goes beyond purely academic metrics. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's file, including a detailed examination of the disciplinary infractions, the context surrounding them, the applicant's subsequent conduct and demonstrated growth, and any supporting documentation provided by the applicant or their previous institution. This approach aligns with the principles of individualized assessment and the recognition that past mistakes do not necessarily preclude future success, provided there is evidence of learning and positive change. It also respects the university's right to set admission standards while ensuring that these standards are applied equitably and with consideration for mitigating factors. This aligns with the spirit of fostering well-rounded individuals who can contribute positively to the medical profession and society, a common goal in higher education admissions. An incorrect approach would be to automatically disqualify the applicant based solely on the existence of disciplinary infractions, regardless of their nature, severity, or the time elapsed since they occurred. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of rehabilitation and personal development, potentially leading to unfair exclusion of a candidate who might otherwise be a valuable addition to the university. Such an approach could also be seen as overly rigid and lacking in compassion, which are important qualities in the medical field. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the disciplinary record entirely and admit the student without any further consideration, assuming that academic merit alone is sufficient. This neglects the university's responsibility to ensure that admitted students possess the character and integrity expected of future medical professionals. While academic prowess is crucial, ethical conduct and a commitment to professional standards are equally important, and a complete disregard for disciplinary history could compromise these values. A third incorrect approach would be to grant admission without a thorough and documented review process, perhaps due to external pressure or a desire to meet enrollment targets. This undermines the integrity of the admissions process and could lead to the admission of students who are not a good fit for the university or the medical profession, potentially creating future problems for both the individual and the institution. It also fails to uphold the principles of transparency and accountability in admissions. A professional decision-making process in such a situation should involve a structured review that considers all aspects of the applicant's profile. This includes 1. A thorough understanding of the university's admission policies and any specific guidelines related to character assessment. 2. A detailed review of the applicant's academic achievements and their consistency. 3. A careful examination of the disciplinary record, seeking to understand the nature, frequency, and context of the infractions. 4. Consideration of any explanations or mitigating circumstances provided by the applicant. 5. An assessment of the applicant's demonstrated growth and maturity since the infractions. 6. Consultation with relevant university committees or personnel if necessary. 7. A final decision based on a holistic evaluation, ensuring fairness, equity, and adherence to regulatory and ethical standards. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that a prospective student who has demonstrated exceptional enthusiasm and participation in extracurricular medical clubs has achieved scores slightly below the typical threshold for admission to Anhui Medical University's undergraduate program. The admissions committee is aware of the student's strong personal qualities and potential for future contribution to the medical field, as highlighted by their teachers. However, their standardized test scores and overall academic record do not fully meet the established minimum requirements. Option A. Recommend admission based on the student's demonstrated passion and potential, with a note to the faculty to provide additional support during their studies. Option B. Forward the application for further review by a special committee to assess the student's potential for success despite not meeting the minimum academic thresholds. Option C. Reject the application, strictly adhering to the published minimum academic and standardized test score requirements. Option D. Offer the student a conditional admission, contingent upon achieving a significantly higher score in a re-evaluation of their standardized tests within a specified timeframe. The correct answer is A. Recommend admission based on the student's demonstrated passion and potential, with a note to the faculty to provide additional support during their studies. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived academic performance and the objective assessment criteria. The pressure to admit qualified students while maintaining academic integrity requires careful judgment. The scenario demands adherence to the Anhui Medical University's admission regulations, which prioritize standardized testing and holistic review within defined parameters. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the student's application against all established admission criteria, including academic records, standardized test scores, and any supplementary materials, without allowing personal bias or external pressure to influence the decision. This aligns with the principles of fairness and meritocracy enshrined in university admission guidelines. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams in China, including those at Anhui Medical University, emphasizes objective evaluation and adherence to published admission standards. Decisions must be justifiable based on these standards, ensuring equal opportunity for all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the student's perceived potential or a teacher's personal recommendation, without concrete evidence that meets the university's stated requirements. This fails to uphold the principle of objective assessment and could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, undermining the academic standards of the university. Another incorrect approach would be to deviate from the established scoring or evaluation rubric to accommodate a particular student, which constitutes a breach of procedural fairness and regulatory compliance. Such actions can lead to accusations of favoritism and compromise the integrity of the entire admission process. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing regulations and admission policies. This framework involves systematically applying all defined criteria to each applicant, documenting the evaluation process, and seeking consensus or review for borderline cases. Transparency and consistency are paramount. When faced with complex situations, professionals should refer to established protocols and seek guidance from senior administrators or admissions committees to ensure decisions are both compliant and ethically sound. Question 4. Quality control measures reveal that a proposed question for the Anhui Medical University entrance exam on the pathophysiology of hypertension is too narrowly focused on a specific experimental model not covered in the standard curriculum. Which of the following approaches would be most appropriate for revising the question to ensure it aligns with the exam's regulatory framework and assessment objectives? Option A. Modify the question to include complex statistical data from the experimental model, requiring candidates to interpret nuanced research findings. Option B. Broaden the question to include ethical considerations related to hypertension management, even if not explicitly part of the core pathophysiology syllabus. Option C. Replace the question entirely with one about the latest advancements in antihypertensive drug development, assuming candidates will be interested in such topics. Option D. Rephrase the question to focus on the general physiological mechanisms of blood pressure regulation and the common factors contributing to essential hypertension, as typically covered in introductory medical physiology courses. The correct answer is D. Rephrase the question to focus on the general physiological mechanisms of blood pressure regulation and the common factors contributing to essential hypertension, as typically covered in introductory medical physiology courses. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for misinterpreting or misapplying complex scientific findings in a high-stakes environment like a university entrance exam. The pressure to accurately assess candidates' understanding of medical principles, coupled with the need to adhere to the specific curriculum and examination guidelines of Anhui Medical University, demands meticulous attention to detail and a deep understanding of the examination's regulatory framework. The challenge lies in ensuring that the examination questions are not only relevant to the intended learning outcomes, but also fair, unambiguous, and strictly aligned with the approved syllabus and assessment criteria. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves developing a question that directly tests a candidate's comprehension of a specific medical concept as outlined in the Anhui Medical University entrance exam syllabus. This approach ensures that the question is relevant, fair, and assesses knowledge that is expected of prospective students. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams in China, including those for medical universities, emphasizes the assessment of foundational knowledge and critical thinking skills directly related to the prescribed curriculum. Therefore, a question that probes a candidate's understanding of the physiological mechanisms of a common disease, as taught within the university's preparatory materials or standard medical textbooks adopted by the university, is the most appropriate. This aligns with the principle of assessing candidates on material they are expected to have learned. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to formulate a question based on cutting-edge research findings that have not yet been integrated into the standard curriculum or widely accepted medical knowledge for undergraduate entry. This fails to adhere to the principle of assessing candidates on material they are expected to know, as mandated by the examination's regulatory framework. It introduces an unfair advantage to candidates who may have access to specialized literature beyond the scope of the entrance exam preparation. Another incorrect approach would be to create a question that relies on subjective interpretation or opinion rather than objective scientific understanding. University entrance exams are designed to measure demonstrable knowledge and skills, not personal viewpoints. A question that asks for a best guess, or a most likely scenario without clear scientific parameters, would be problematic and inconsistent with the rigorous assessment standards expected for medical education. A third incorrect approach would be to generate a question that is overly complex or uses jargon not typically encountered in introductory medical education, even if the underlying concept is relevant. This could lead to candidates being penalized for unfamiliar terminology rather than a lack of understanding of the core medical principle. The examination's guidelines implicitly require clarity and accessibility in question design, ensuring that assessment is based on knowledge, not on the ability to decipher obscure language. Professional reasoning. Professionals involved in setting university entrance exams must adopt a systematic approach. This begins with a thorough review of the official syllabus and examination guidelines for Anhui Medical University. They should identify key learning objectives and core concepts within the medical disciplines covered. When developing questions, they must ensure direct alignment with these objectives. Furthermore, questions should be reviewed for clarity, accuracy, and fairness, ensuring they are free from ambiguity and do not rely on information outside the expected scope of study. A peer review process, involving experienced educators familiar with the exam's context, is crucial for validating question quality and adherence to regulatory standards. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that a student in their final year at Anhui Medical University has been accused of plagiarism in their thesis. The faculty advisor, who has a close working relationship with the student and believes strongly in their potential, has discovered what appears to be substantial overlap with published material. The advisor is concerned about the student's future career prospects and the university's reputation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the established regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for handling such an academic integrity issue at Anhui Medical University? Option A. Discreetly discuss the matter with senior faculty members to gauge their opinion on how to handle it without formally initiating a process, to avoid unnecessary reputational damage. Option B. Immediately report the suspected plagiarism to the university's Academic Integrity Committee, providing all gathered evidence and recommending a formal investigation according to university policy, while ensuring the student is informed of the allegations and their right to respond. Option C. Advise the student to withdraw their thesis and resubmit a revised version without formal reporting, assuming the overlap was unintentional and can be corrected. Option D. Confront the student directly with the evidence and, based on their explanation, decide whether to overlook the issue given their otherwise strong academic record and potential. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the suspected plagiarism to the university's Academic Integrity Committee, providing all gathered evidence and recommending a formal investigation according to university policy, while ensuring the student is informed of the allegations and their right to respond. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic settings where a student's academic integrity is questioned. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold academic standards and investigate potential misconduct with the student's right to a fair process and the university's reputation. A hasty or biased investigation can lead to severe consequences for the student and legal repercussions for the university. Therefore, a thorough, objective, and procedurally sound approach is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented investigation that adheres strictly to Anhui Medical University's established academic integrity policies and procedures. This includes gathering all relevant evidence, providing the student with a clear understanding of the allegations, offering them an opportunity to respond, and ensuring that the decision-making process is impartial and based solely on the evidence presented, in accordance with university regulations. This upholds the principles of natural justice and due process, ensuring fairness to the student while maintaining the integrity of the academic program. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that immediately imposes disciplinary action without a formal investigation or allowing the student to present their case violates the university's procedural fairness requirements and the student's right to a defense. This is a direct contravention of established academic regulations and ethical principles of fairness. An approach that dismisses the allegations without a thorough review of the evidence, simply because the student is a high-achieving individual, compromises academic standards, and sets a dangerous precedent. This failure to investigate undermines the university's commitment to academic integrity and can lead to a perception of favoritism or bias. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or hearsay without corroboration and then proceeds to judgment is procedurally unsound and ethically questionable. University regulations typically require concrete evidence to support any disciplinary actions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic institutions must follow a structured decision-making process when addressing academic misconduct. This process typically involves 1. Identifying the alleged misconduct and relevant university policies. 2. Gathering all pertinent evidence objectively. 3. Informing the accused party of the allegations and their rights. 4. Providing a fair opportunity for the accused to respond and present their defense. 5. Conducting an impartial review of all evidence and arguments. 6. Making a decision based solely on the evidence and in accordance with university regulations. 7. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the decision. Question 6. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a prospective student preparing for the Anhui Medical University entrance exam is reviewing case studies to understand clinical decision-making. One case study involves a patient with a rare infectious disease. The student is considering discussing the case details, including the patient's name and specific symptoms, with fellow applicants to gain different perspectives on diagnosis and treatment options, believing this will enhance their understanding for the exam. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates an understanding of ethical and regulatory expectations for future medical professionals? Option A. Discussing the anonymized symptoms and general disease characteristics of the case study with fellow applicants, without revealing any personally identifiable information, to explore diagnostic and treatment strategies. Option B. Deciding not to discuss the case study at all with anyone, to avoid any potential ethical missteps and relying solely on individual study. Option C. Seeking permission from the hypothetical patient, if a real patient were involved, to discuss their case with fellow applicants for educational purposes while anonymizing their identity. Option D. Discussing the case study details, including the patient's name and specific symptoms, with fellow applicants to solicit diverse opinions for exam preparation. The correct answer is D. Discussing the case study details, including the patient's name and specific symptoms, with fellow applicants to solicit diverse opinions for exam preparation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a prospective medical student preparing for the Anhui Medical University entrance exam. The challenge lies in understanding and applying the ethical principles and regulatory guidelines that govern medical practice and education in China, specifically as they pertain to patient confidentiality and informed consent, even in a simulated or hypothetical context relevant to an entrance exam. The pressure of the entrance exam, combined with the need to demonstrate an understanding of these critical principles, requires careful judgment to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate actions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing patient confidentiality and obtaining informed consent, even when dealing with hypothetical case studies or scenarios presented in an exam. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of medical practice in China, which are deeply rooted in respect for individual autonomy and the protection of sensitive personal information. The regulatory framework for medical education and practice in China emphasizes the importance of these principles. Therefore, a prospective student demonstrating an understanding of these by seeking consent and ensuring confidentiality, even in a simulated context, reflects a strong ethical foundation and an awareness of professional responsibilities, which is a key expectation for future medical professionals. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that bypasses the need for consent or disregards confidentiality, even in a hypothetical exam scenario, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of medical ethics and relevant regulations. This failure to recognize the importance of patient rights and data protection is a significant ethical lapse. Such an approach suggests a lack of respect for individuals and a potential for future professional misconduct. It directly contravenes the principles of patient-centered care and the legal and ethical obligations to safeguard sensitive health information, as stipulated by Chinese medical ethics guidelines and relevant laws concerning personal information protection. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with similar situations, even in educational or simulated settings, should adopt a decision-making framework that consistently upholds ethical principles. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical principles at play, e.g., confidentiality, autonomy, beneficence. 2. Consulting relevant professional codes of conduct and legal regulations. In this case, Anhui Medical University's guidelines and Chinese medical ethics standards. 3. Evaluating potential actions against these principles and regulations. 4. Choosing the action that best protects patient rights and upholds professional integrity, even when the stakes are perceived to be lower, such as in an exam. This consistent application of ethical reasoning builds a strong foundation for responsible medical practice. Question 7. Governance review demonstrates that a patient admitted to Anhui Medical University Hospital requires an experimental treatment not yet widely approved, with potential life-saving benefits but also significant unknown risks. The patient is conscious but anxious and has limited understanding of complex medical terminology. The attending physician believes immediate commencement of the treatment is critical for the patient's survival. Which of the following actions best adheres to the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for medical practice at Anhui Medical University? Option A. Obtain explicit, documented informed consent from the patient after explaining the experimental nature of the treatment, potential risks, benefits, and their right to refuse, using simplified language and allowing ample time for questions. Option B. Delay the treatment for several days to gather additional administrative approvals from multiple hospital departments, even if it means the patient's condition deteriorates. Option C. Proceed with the experimental treatment immediately, prioritizing the patient's life-saving potential over the formal consent process due to the critical nature of the condition. Option D. Share the patient's anonymized medical data with an external research institution for preliminary analysis to assess the treatment's efficacy before obtaining patient consent. The correct answer is A. Obtain explicit, documented informed consent from the patient after explaining the experimental nature of the treatment, potential risks, benefits, and their right to refuse, using simplified language and allowing ample time for questions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical and regulatory obligations of medical professionals within the Anhui Medical University's framework. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need for patient care with the stringent requirements for informed consent and data privacy, as stipulated by Chinese medical regulations and university guidelines. A hasty decision without proper adherence to these protocols could lead to severe ethical breaches and legal repercussions. The correct approach involves meticulously following the established procedures for obtaining informed consent from the patient or their legal guardian, ensuring they fully understand the experimental nature of the treatment, its potential risks and benefits, and their right to refuse. This aligns with the principles of patient autonomy and the regulatory framework governing clinical research and novel treatments in China, which emphasizes transparency and voluntary participation. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the experimental treatment without explicit, documented informed consent from the patient or guardian would violate fundamental patient rights and regulatory mandates. This failure to obtain proper consent is a direct contravention of ethical medical practice and Chinese healthcare laws concerning patient autonomy and research ethics. Another incorrect approach, that of delaying treatment significantly to gather more administrative approvals beyond what is immediately necessary for patient safety and consent, could be detrimental to the patient's well-being. While adherence to regulations is crucial, the principle of beneficence, which dictates acting in the patient's best interest, must also be considered. The challenge is to find the regulatory pathway that allows for timely intervention when medically indicated, without compromising ethical standards. A further incorrect approach, that of sharing patient data with external researchers without explicit consent, even for potential future benefit, would be a severe breach of patient confidentiality and data protection laws in China. Medical information is highly sensitive, and its disclosure is strictly regulated to protect patient privacy. The professional reasoning process in such a situation should involve 1. Prioritizing patient safety and well-being. 2. Thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory requirements for experimental treatments and informed consent within Anhui Medical University and Chinese law. 3. Engaging in clear and open communication with the patient or their guardian, explaining all aspects of the proposed treatment. 4. Documenting all consent processes meticulously. 5. Consulting with institutional ethics committees or supervisors if any ambiguity exists regarding the regulatory or ethical path forward. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows that a medical student at Anhui Medical University has consistently achieved top marks in all theoretical subjects and practical examinations. However, multiple reports have been filed by faculty and peers detailing instances of the student exhibiting a lack of empathy towards patients during clinical rotations and engaging in dishonest reporting of patient interactions. The university is now tasked with determining the appropriate course of action for this student's progression. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for medical education at Anhui Medical University? Option A. Advise the student to take a leave of absence to reflect on their behavior without a formal investigation and revisit their academic standing upon their return. Option B. Initiate a formal disciplinary inquiry into the reported ethical breaches, involving a review of evidence, an opportunity for the student to respond, and consultation with the university's ethics committee before making any decisions on academic progression. Option C. Proceed with the student's advancement to the next academic year based solely on their outstanding academic performance, while noting the reports for future reference. Option D. Immediately recommend the student's expulsion from the medical program due to the seriousness of the ethical allegations, regardless of their academic achievements. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the student's advancement to the next academic year based solely on their outstanding academic performance, while noting the reports for future reference. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical education where a student's academic performance is strong, but their ethical conduct raises concerns. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic excellence with its responsibility to uphold professional ethical standards for future medical practitioners. A hasty decision could unfairly penalize a student with potential, while an overly lenient one could compromise patient safety and the integrity of the medical profession. Careful judgment is required to ensure a fair and thorough assessment that considers all relevant factors. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the student's academic record alongside a detailed investigation into the reported ethical breaches. This includes gathering evidence, allowing the student to respond to allegations, and consulting relevant university policies and ethical guidelines for medical students. This approach is justified by the Anhui Medical University's commitment to producing not only academically competent, but also ethically sound physicians. The university's regulations likely stipulate a clear process for addressing student misconduct, ensuring due process and a fair hearing, which this approach adheres to. It prioritizes a holistic evaluation, recognizing that clinical practice demands both knowledge and integrity. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the student's high academic scores and dismisses the ethical concerns, fails to acknowledge the fundamental requirement for ethical behavior in medicine. This ignores the university's responsibility to ensure its graduates meet professional standards, potentially leading to the graduation of individuals who may pose a risk to patients. Violates the implicit and explicit ethical codes governing medical practice and education, an approach that immediately recommends severe disciplinary action, such as expulsion, without a thorough investigation and due process is also flawed. This could be seen as punitive and unfair, especially if the ethical breaches are minor or misunderstood. It bypasses the established procedures for addressing student misconduct, potentially violating the student's rights and the university's own disciplinary regulations. An approach that delays addressing the ethical concerns while focusing only on academic progression is negligent. Ethical issues, if left unaddressed, can escalate and have serious consequences for the student, the university, and future patients. This approach fails to uphold the university's duty of care and its commitment to maintaining high professional standards from the outset of a student's training. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Identifying the core issue, balancing academic merit with ethical conduct. 2. Gathering all relevant information, academic records, incident reports, witness statements, and university policies. 3. Applying established procedures, following the university's disciplinary and academic review protocols. 4. Ensuring fairness and due process, providing the student with an opportunity to be heard and present their case. 5. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, academic advisors, ethics committees, and administrative bodies. 6. Making a decision based on evidence and policy, ensuring the decision is justifiable, proportionate, and aligned with the university's mission and ethical obligations. Question 9. The evaluation methodology shows that a student applying for advanced medical studies at Anhui Medical University has demonstrated exceptional academic prowess in theoretical subjects. However, during a practical clinical rotation, multiple independent reports have surfaced alleging the student engaged in deceptive practices to obtain favorable patient feedback, which directly impacts their clinical assessment scores. The university is now deliberating on how to proceed with the student's application and evaluation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for medical education in China? Option A. Proceed with the application based on the student's strong academic record, while issuing a formal warning about ethical conduct without further investigation into the specific allegations. Option B. Initiate a formal investigation into the alleged deceptive practices, ensuring the student has the opportunity to respond, and involve the university's Academic Integrity Committee in a comprehensive review before making a final decision. Option C. Immediately reject the student's application due to the serious nature of the allegations, prioritizing the integrity of the clinical assessment process. Option D. Postpone the decision indefinitely until the student completes further remedial ethics training, without a clear timeline or specific learning objectives for such training. The correct answer is C. Immediately reject the student's application due to the serious nature of the allegations, prioritizing the integrity of the clinical assessment process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical education where a student's academic performance is strong, but their ethical conduct raises concerns. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic excellence with its responsibility to uphold professional ethical standards for future medical practitioners. A hasty decision could unfairly penalize a student with potential, while an overly lenient one could compromise patient safety and the integrity of the medical profession. The Anhui Medical University entrance exam regulations, as well as broader ethical guidelines for medical professionals in China, emphasize the importance of both academic and ethical competence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, multifaceted investigation that prioritizes fairness and due process. This includes gathering comprehensive evidence regarding the alleged academic misconduct, providing the student with a clear opportunity to respond and present their defense, and involving relevant university committees, such as an academic integrity board or ethics committee, in the decision-making process. This approach aligns with the principles of natural justice and the regulatory framework governing academic institutions in China, which mandates fair procedures and evidence-based decision-making. It ensures that any disciplinary action is proportionate and well-justified, respecting the student's rights while upholding institutional standards. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that immediately dismisses the student based solely on the initial accusation, without a formal investigation or hearing, violates the principle of due process. This is ethically unsound and likely contravenes university regulations that require a thorough review of all evidence and a chance for the student to be heard. An approach that focuses exclusively on the student's academic achievements, overlooking the seriousness of the ethical concerns, fails to address the core issue of professional suitability. Medical practice demands not only knowledge but also integrity, and ignoring ethical lapses can have severe consequences for future patient care and public trust, which is a fundamental expectation of medical professionals as outlined in relevant Chinese medical ethics guidelines. An approach that imposes a severe penalty without considering the context, intent, or the student's willingness to learn from the mistake, also problematic. While misconduct must be addressed, a punitive approach without an educational component or a clear path for remediation may not serve the best interests of the student's development as a future physician or the university's educational mission. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such situations should adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, clearly identify the alleged violation and the relevant university policies and ethical codes. Second, initiate a fair and impartial investigation, ensuring all parties have an opportunity to present their case. Third, consult with relevant stakeholders and committees to ensure a comprehensive and balanced assessment. Fourth, consider the severity of the offense, the student's past record, and their potential for rehabilitation. Finally, ensure that the decision is well documented, communicated clearly, and aligns with both regulatory requirements and ethical principles. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a prospective medical student, while achieving exceptionally high scores on the Anhui Medical University entrance exam, has also been flagged for a serious ethical violation during their secondary education, as reported by their former school. How should the university proceed with the student's application? Option A. Defer the decision until the student has completed their first year of medical school, hoping the ethical concerns will resolve themselves. Option B. Immediately reject the student's application based on the ethical violation report without further inquiry. Option C. Solely consider the student's high entrance exam scores for admission, assuming academic potential outweighs past ethical issues. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation into the reported ethical violation, review university policies on student conduct, and convene a committee to assess the student's overall suitability for medical training, considering both academic merit and ethical standing. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough investigation into the reported ethical violation, review university policies on student conduct, and convene a committee to assess the student's overall suitability for medical training, considering both academic merit and ethical standing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical education where a student's academic performance is strong, but their ethical conduct raises concerns. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic excellence with its responsibility to uphold professional ethical standards for future medical practitioners. A hasty decision could unfairly penalize a student with potential, while an overly lenient one could compromise patient safety and the integrity of the medical profession. Careful judgment is required to ensure a fair and thorough assessment that considers all relevant factors. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the student's academic record alongside a detailed investigation into the reported ethical breaches. This includes gathering evidence, allowing the student to respond to allegations, and consulting relevant university policies and ethical guidelines specific to medical education in China. The Anhui Medical University entrance exam framework, while focused on admission, implies a broader commitment to student conduct and professional development throughout their studies. Therefore, addressing ethical concerns through established disciplinary procedures, which may involve a review committee and potential remediation or disciplinary actions, is the most appropriate and ethically sound path. This ensures due process for the student and upholds the university's standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on academic scores and disregarding the ethical concerns is professionally unacceptable because it ignores a critical component of medical professionalism. Medical practitioners are held to high ethical standards, and a failure to address breaches, even in a student, risks graduating individuals who may pose a risk to patients. This approach violates the implicit ethical contract of medical education to produce not only knowledgeable, but also trustworthy professionals. Immediately dismissing the student based on a single report without a thorough investigation is also professionally unsound. This fails to provide the student with due process, which is a fundamental principle of fairness. It also bypasses the university's established procedures for handling misconduct, potentially leading to an unjust outcome and legal challenges. The university has a responsibility to investigate allegations thoroughly before making a final decision. Ignoring the ethical concerns until after graduation is a severe dereliction of duty. The university has a responsibility to ensure that students meet ethical standards throughout their training, not just at the point of admission. Allowing a student with known ethical issues to graduate could have serious consequences for future patients and the reputation of the medical profession. This approach prioritizes expediency over patient safety and professional integrity. Professional reasoning. Professionals in medical education should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a holistic assessment of a student's suitability for the profession. This involves 1. Acknowledging and investigating all reported concerns, both academic and ethical. 2. Adhering strictly to the university's established policies and procedures for student conduct and disciplinary actions. 3. Ensuring fairness and due process for the student, including opportunities to respond to allegations. 4. Consulting with relevant university departments, e.g., Student Affairs Ethics Committee, to ensure a well-rounded decision. 5. Considering the potential impact of any decision on patient safety and the integrity of the medical profession. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that a medical student, while demonstrating exceptional academic performance in their coursework, has been reported for multiple instances of unprofessional behavior towards peers and faculty, including disrespectful communication and a lack of accountability for missed deadlines. Considering the Anhui Medical University's emphasis on both academic rigor and professional ethics for its graduates, which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Focus solely on the student's outstanding academic achievements and dismiss the reported unprofessional behavior as minor issues that will resolve with time and further academic success. Option B. Suggest an informal conversation with the student about their behavior, without documenting the discussion or the student's response, and consider the matter closed if the student expresses remorse. Option C. Initiate a formal review process that includes a thorough investigation of the reported incidents, a detailed examination of the student's academic record, and a formal interview with the student to gather their perspective and any mitigating factors. Option D. Immediately recommend disciplinary action, including potential suspension, based on the severity of the reported unprofessional behavior, without further investigation. The correct answer is D. Immediately recommend disciplinary action, including potential suspension, based on the severity of the reported unprofessional behavior, without further investigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical education where a student's academic performance is strong, but their ethical conduct raises concerns. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic excellence with its responsibility to uphold professional ethical standards for future medical practitioners. A hasty decision could unfairly penalize a student with potential, while an overly lenient one could compromise patient safety and the integrity of the medical profession. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness to the student and adherence to the university's ethical guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, multifaceted investigation that prioritizes gathering comprehensive evidence and providing the student with a fair opportunity to respond. This aligns with the principles of natural justice and the Anhui Medical University's commitment to a fair and transparent disciplinary process. Specifically, it requires a formal review of the student's academic record, a detailed examination of the reported ethical breaches, and an interview with the student to understand their perspective and any mitigating circumstances. This approach ensures that any decision is based on facts, not assumptions, and respects the student's right to due process, as implicitly required by the university's internal regulations on student conduct and academic integrity. Incorrect approach is analysis. an approach that immediately recommends disciplinary action based solely on the initial report of ethical misconduct, without further investigation or student input, fails to uphold the principles of fairness and due process. This approach risks making a judgment based on incomplete information and denies the student the opportunity to present their side of the story, which is a fundamental ethical and procedural requirement in any disciplinary matter. An approach that dismisses the ethical concerns due to the student's strong academic performance overlooks the critical importance of ethical conduct in the medical profession. Academic prowess alone does not guarantee a competent or ethical physician. This approach prioritizes one aspect of a student's profile over another, potentially compromising the university's duty to ensure all graduates meet the required ethical standards for patient care. An approach that suggests a vague, informal discussion without documenting the process or the student's response is also problematic. While informal discussions can be a first step, a serious ethical breach requires a more structured and documented process to ensure accountability and to establish a clear record of the university's actions and the student's engagement with the process. This lack of formality can lead to inconsistencies and a perception of unfairness. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. First, they must clearly identify the core issue, a conflict between academic achievement and ethical concerns. Second, they should consult relevant university policies and guidelines regarding student conduct, disciplinary procedures, and academic integrity. Third, they must gather all available information, including academic records and specific details of the alleged ethical breaches. Fourth, they should engage the student in a formal process, allowing them to respond to the allegations. Fifth, they should weigh all evidence objectively, considering both academic performance and ethical conduct, before making a decision that is fair, consistent with regulations, and upholds the standards of the medical profession. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that a second-year medical student at Anhui Medical University has achieved excellent scores in clinical rotations and theoretical subjects related to patient care, but has received a failing grade in a core foundational science course, e.g., anatomy or physiology, that is critical for understanding disease mechanisms. The student has no prior academic disciplinary issues. What is the most appropriate next step for the university's academic review committee? Option A. Overlook the failing grade in the foundational science course, given the student's strong performance in clinical rotations and theoretical subjects directly related to patient care. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive academic review, including an assessment of the student's understanding of the foundational science material and exploration of potential support mechanisms. Before making any decisions about progression, Option C. Advise the student to focus on their strengths in clinical areas and suggest they consider a less demanding medical specialty that does not heavily rely on foundational sciences. Option D. Recommend immediate dismissal from the program due to the failure in a critical foundational science course, regardless of performance in other areas. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive academic review, including an assessment of the student's understanding of the foundational science material and exploration of potential support mechanisms, before making any decisions about progression. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical education where a student's academic performance is inconsistent, raising concerns about their suitability for the medical profession. The challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold academic standards with the university's responsibility to provide fair evaluation and support for its students. The university must adhere to its own regulations and national guidelines for medical education, ensuring that any decision regarding a student's progression is well-founded, transparent, and ethically sound. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the student's academic record, considering all available data points, including examination results, clinical performance evaluations, and any documented extenuating circumstances. This approach aligns with the principles of fair assessment and due process, as mandated by the Anhui Medical University's academic regulations and the broader framework for medical education in China. It allows for a holistic understanding of the student's capabilities and potential, ensuring that decisions are not based on isolated incidents, but on a pattern of performance. This systematic evaluation is crucial for identifying areas of weakness and determining appropriate interventions, such as remedial studies or additional support, before considering more severe consequences. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that immediately recommends dismissal based solely on a single low score in a foundational science course fails to consider the student's overall academic trajectory and potential for improvement. This is a premature and potentially unfair judgment, violating the principle of providing students with opportunities to demonstrate their learning and overcome challenges, as implied by the university's commitment to student development. An approach that focuses exclusively on the student's perceived lack of passion, without concrete evidence from their academic or clinical performance, is subjective and unprofessional. Decisions regarding a student's future in medicine must be grounded in objective academic and professional competencies, not personal interpretations of their enthusiasm. This approach risks bias and overlooks the possibility that a student might be experiencing temporary difficulties that do not reflect their long-term suitability. An approach that suggests overlooking the low score due to the student's good performance in other subjects, without a formal process for academic review or consideration of the foundational importance of the failed subject, undermines the integrity of the curriculum and the assessment system. While a balanced view is important, all core competencies must be met to a satisfactory standard, and any deviation requires a structured and justifiable rationale, not an ad hoc decision. Professional reasoning. Professionals in medical education should adopt a structured, evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Gathering all relevant data, academic transcripts, examination results, clinical evaluations, and any documented personal circumstances. 2. Consulting relevant regulations, Anhui Medical University's academic policies, examination rules, and any national guidelines for medical student progression. 3. Applying a holistic assessment, evaluating the student's performance across all aspects of their studies, not just isolated scores. 4. Identifying areas for improvement and support, determining if the student requires remedial teaching, counseling, or other forms of assistance. 5. Following due process, ensuring that any disciplinary or academic progression decisions are transparent, fair, and communicated clearly to the student, with opportunities for appeal. Question 13. The control framework reveals that during the Anhui Medical University entrance examination, an invigilator observes a candidate discreetly using a small, pre-written note hidden in their palm. The invigilator is aware of the strict regulations prohibiting any form of external assistance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the invigilator to uphold the integrity of the examination? Option A. Confront the candidate privately after the examination to discuss the observed behavior without immediate action. Option B. Ignore the note to avoid disrupting the examination and potentially causing a scene, assuming it is minor. Option C. Discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's examination paper, then report the incident to the examination supervisor according to established procedures. Option D. Publicly reprimand the candidate and demand the note be handed over immediately to maintain order. The correct answer is C. Discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's examination paper, then report the incident to the examination supervisor according to established procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes, particularly in the context of a high-stakes university entrance exam like that for Anhui Medical University. The pressure to perform well can lead to ethical compromises. Careful judgment is required to navigate these pressures while upholding the principles of fairness and academic honesty. The correct approach involves a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to the established examination regulations. This means ensuring that all candidates are assessed on their own merit without any form of unfair advantage. Specifically, it requires the invigilator to strictly enforce the rules against any form of academic dishonesty, including the use of unauthorized materials. This aligns with the core principles of fairness and integrity that underpin any educational assessment system, and specifically with the regulations governing university entrance examinations in China, which emphasize meritocratic selection and the prevention of cheating. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking or downplaying the observed irregularity would be a direct violation of the examination's integrity. This failure stems from a disregard for the established rules and regulations designed to ensure a fair and equitable assessment process. Such an action undermines the credibility of the examination and devalues the efforts of honest candidates. Another incorrect approach, such as confronting the candidate publicly and aggressively, while stemming from a desire to address the issue, is professionally inappropriate. While the intent might be to uphold the rules, the method fails to follow the prescribed procedures for handling suspected academic misconduct. This can lead to unnecessary disruption, potential false accusations, and a breakdown of order within the examination hall, violating guidelines on maintaining a calm and controlled testing environment. A further incorrect approach, such as reporting the incident without gathering sufficient evidence or following the official reporting protocol, also represents a failure. This could lead to an unfair accusation against the candidate or an incomplete investigation, failing to meet the standards of due process and thoroughness expected in such matters. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the examination's rules and regulations. When an irregularity is observed, the professional must first discreetly and calmly assess the situation to confirm the violation. Following this, they must adhere strictly to the established protocol for reporting and handling such incidents, which typically involves documenting the observation, informing the appropriate examination authorities, and allowing them to take the necessary disciplinary actions. This ensures that the situation is handled fairly, impartially, and in accordance with the governing framework. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows that a third-year medical student, diagnosed with dyslexia, is consistently scoring below the passing threshold on written examinations, despite demonstrating strong understanding and practical skills in clinical rotations and oral assessments. The faculty is considering how to address this discrepancy to ensure fair evaluation and support the student's progression. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Anhui Medical University's regulatory framework for student assessment and support? Option A. Allow the student to pass all written examinations without further assessment, based on their performance in clinical rotations and oral assessments. Option B. Implement a revised assessment strategy that includes alternative formats for demonstrating knowledge, such as oral examinations or practical demonstrations, for all future written assessments after a formal review by the Student Support Services and Academic Committee. Option C. Advise the student to withdraw from the program due to their inability to meet the standard requirements for written examinations. Option D. Suggest the student seek external tutoring to improve their reading and writing skills independently, without involving university support services in the assessment process. The correct answer is B. Implement a revised assessment strategy that includes alternative formats for demonstrating knowledge, such as oral examinations or practical demonstrations, for all future written assessments, after a formal review by the Student Support Services and Academic Committee. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical education where a student exhibits academic potential but struggles with practical application due to a diagnosed learning disability. The professional challenge lies in balancing the university's academic standards with its ethical obligation to support students with disabilities and ensure fair assessment. The need for careful judgment arises from ensuring that accommodations do not compromise the integrity of the medical degree, while still providing a pathway for the student to succeed. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the student's academic record, the nature of their learning disability, and the specific requirements of the medical program. This approach is justified by the principles of fairness and equity enshrined in Anhui Medical University's regulations concerning student support and academic assessment. Specifically, it aligns with the university's commitment to providing reasonable accommodations for students with documented disabilities, as outlined in its student handbook and relevant provincial educational guidelines. This process ensures that any assessment modifications are tailored to the student's needs without lowering the overall academic rigor expected of medical graduates. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that immediately fails the student without considering accommodations is ethically flawed and likely violates university policy. It disregards the student's right to support and fails to explore alternative assessment methods that could accurately gauge their understanding and competency. This approach prioritizes a rigid adherence to standard assessment over inclusive educational practices. An approach that solely relies on the student's self-advocacy without any formal university process for disability support is also problematic. While self-advocacy is important, the university has a responsibility to have established procedures for identifying, assessing, and accommodating learning disabilities. This approach places an undue burden on the student and bypasses established support mechanisms. An approach that proposes significantly altering the core curriculum or clinical competencies to accommodate the student's disability would compromise the integrity of the medical degree. Medical education aims to produce competent practitioners, and certain fundamental skills and knowledge are non-negotiable. This approach fails to recognize the essential learning outcomes required for safe medical practice. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first consulting university policies on student support and academic assessment for students with disabilities. A collaborative approach involving the student, relevant academic advisors, disability support services, and potentially faculty members is crucial. The decision-making process should prioritize a fair and equitable assessment that upholds academic standards while providing necessary support. This involves understanding the specific learning disability, identifying potential accommodations that do not compromise essential learning outcomes, and implementing a revised assessment plan that accurately reflects the student's knowledge and skills. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals that a new teaching methodology implemented in a pilot program at Anhui Medical University has shown some promising initial results in improving student understanding of complex anatomical concepts. However, the study's sample size is small, and the data collection period was limited, meaning the findings are not yet statistically robust enough to draw definitive conclusions about long-term effectiveness or widespread applicability. The university's public relations department is eager to announce these breakthroughs to enhance the university's reputation. Which of the following approaches best reflects the ethical and professional responsibilities of the research team and the university? Option A. Withhold the findings from public dissemination until a larger, more comprehensive study can be conducted, to avoid any potential misinterpretation of preliminary data. Option B. Immediately publish the preliminary findings in a high-impact journal, emphasizing the positive outcomes and downplaying the limitations of the study to generate positive publicity. Option C. Focus the public announcement solely on the innovative aspects of the teaching methodology itself, without mentioning any specific study results, to avoid premature claims. Option D. Publicly announce the preliminary findings as a significant advancement, highlighting the positive trends observed, while also clearly stating that the study is ongoing and further research is required to confirm these initial observations. The correct answer is D. Publicly announce the preliminary findings as a significant advancement, highlighting the positive trends observed, while also clearly stating that the study is ongoing and further research is required to confirm these initial observations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions where research findings, even if preliminary, can have significant implications for institutional reputation and future funding. The pressure to present positive results, coupled with the ethical obligation of scientific integrity, creates a complex decision-making environment. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for favorable outcomes with the duty to accurately report findings, especially when those findings might be unfavorable or require further validation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves transparently communicating the study's limitations and the need for further investigation before making definitive claims. This aligns with the core ethical principles of scientific research, which emphasize honesty, accuracy, and the responsible dissemination of knowledge. Specifically, it adheres to the Anhui Medical University's internal guidelines on research conduct and academic integrity, which mandate the truthful reporting of data and the acknowledgement of any uncertainties or preliminary nature of findings. This approach safeguards the university's reputation by demonstrating a commitment to rigorous scientific standards rather than premature self-promotion. Incorrect approach is analysis, presenting the preliminary findings as conclusive evidence of improved patient outcomes, without acknowledging the limitations or the need for further validation, constitutes a failure in scientific integrity. This misrepresents the research and could lead to the adoption of unproven practices, potentially harming patients. It violates the university's ethical codes regarding the responsible reporting of research. Focusing solely on the positive aspects of the preliminary data, while downplaying or omitting any negative or inconclusive findings, is a form of data manipulation and misrepresentation. This is a direct breach of academic honesty and the principles of objective scientific reporting, delaying the dissemination of the findings indefinitely due to the unfavorable preliminary results, without a clear plan for further research or a justification for the delay based on scientific rigor, can also be problematic. While caution is necessary, indefinite withholding of information without valid scientific reasons can be seen as an attempt to avoid negative publicity, which is ethically unsound. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a framework that prioritizes scientific integrity and ethical reporting. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the study's methodology and results, including any limitations. 2. Consulting with senior colleagues or ethics committees to discuss the implications of the findings. 3. Communicating findings accurately and transparently, clearly distinguishing between preliminary and conclusive results. 4. Developing a clear plan for further research or validation if necessary. 5. Adhering strictly to institutional policies on research conduct and publication. Question 16. Upon reviewing the examination hall during the Anhui Medical University entrance exam, a candidate notices another student discreetly looking at notes concealed within their sleeve. The candidate is aware of the strict regulations against any form of cheating during the exam. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Confront the student directly about their actions during the exam. Option B. Ignore the situation to avoid causing a disturbance or potential conflict. Option C. Discuss the observation with other candidates to gauge their opinions. Option D. Immediately report the observed cheating to the examination proctor or supervisor. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the observed cheating to the examination proctor or supervisor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation of academic integrity and the specific regulations governing university entrance examinations in China, as applicable to Anhui Medical University. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to uphold the fairness and validity of the examination process with the personal relationship and potential for undue influence. Strict adherence to the examination regulations is paramount to ensure equal opportunity for all candidates and to maintain the credibility of the university's admissions. The correct approach involves reporting the observed irregularity through the designated official channels without delay. This upholds the principle of fairness by ensuring that all candidates are assessed on their own merit, as mandated by the examination's integrity rules. Reporting the incident to the examination proctor or supervisor, as per the established procedures for Anhui Medical University entrance exams, is the ethically and regulatorily sound action. This allows the examination authorities to investigate and address the situation appropriately, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the entire process. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation. This failure directly violates the ethical duty of vigilance and the regulatory requirement to report any observed misconduct. By remaining silent, the individual implicitly condones the cheating, undermining the fairness of the exam and potentially allowing an unqualified candidate to gain an unfair advantage. Another incorrect approach is to confront the student directly during the exam. This action could disrupt the examination environment for other candidates, potentially leading to accusations of interference or bias. Furthermore, it bypasses the established reporting mechanisms, preventing a formal and impartial investigation by the examination authorities. This approach also carries the risk of personal confrontation and potential escalation, which is not the responsibility of a candidate or observer in this context. A third incorrect approach is to discuss the observation with other candidates. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality regarding examination procedures and can lead to rumors, anxiety, and a breakdown of order within the examination hall. It also fails to address the issue through the proper channels and could be interpreted as an attempt to influence the outcome or create a biased perception of the situation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve immediate recognition of a potential violation of examination rules, a clear understanding of the established reporting procedures for the specific examination, Anhui Medical University entrance exam, and the swift, discreet, and official reporting of the observation to the appropriate authority. The focus must always be on preserving the integrity of the examination process and ensuring a fair assessment for all participants, in accordance with the governing regulations. Question 17. Market research demonstrates that a significant number of applicants for the Anhui Medical University entrance exam are concerned about the fairness and integrity of the examination process. Following the recent administration of the exam, an anonymous report is received alleging that a small group of students in one examination hall may have colluded to share answers during the test. The university administration needs to decide how to respond to this report. Which of the following actions best upholds the principles of academic integrity and fairness as per the Anhui Medical University's regulatory framework? Option A. Ignore the anonymous report as it lacks concrete evidence and could be a malicious attempt to disrupt the examination process. Option B. Publicly announce that an investigation into cheating allegations is underway to deter future misconduct and reassure the public about the exam's integrity. Option C. Immediately initiate a thorough, confidential investigation into the specific allegations, gathering all available evidence and consulting the university's official examination regulations and disciplinary procedures to determine appropriate action based on verified facts. Option D. Cancel the examination for all candidates who took the test in the reported examination hall to ensure absolute fairness, given the potential for widespread compromise. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a thorough, confidential investigation into the specific allegations, gathering all available evidence and consulting the university's official examination regulations and disciplinary procedures to determine appropriate action based on verified facts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical imperative to maintain academic integrity and fairness during a high-stakes university entrance examination. The challenge lies in balancing the need to address potential irregularities with the principle of ensuring a fair and unbiased assessment for all candidates. Careful judgment is required to avoid both overlooking genuine issues and unfairly penalizing innocent students. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based investigation of the reported irregularities. This entails gathering all available information, including the specific nature of the alleged misconduct, the source of the report, and any preliminary evidence. The next step is to consult the Anhui Medical University's established examination regulations and disciplinary procedures. This approach is correct because it adheres strictly to the university's own governance framework, ensuring that any action taken is procedurally sound and legally defensible within the context of Chinese educational law and university policy. It prioritizes fairness by seeking objective evidence before making any decisions that could impact candidates' futures. This aligns with the ethical obligation to uphold the integrity of the examination process and to treat all candidates equitably. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the report without any investigation. This fails to uphold the university's responsibility to ensure a fair examination and could allow genuine misconduct to go unaddressed, undermining the credibility of the entrance exam. It also violates the principle of due diligence. Another incorrect approach would be to implement broad, punitive measures against all candidates in the affected examination hall without specific evidence of widespread cheating. This is ethically unacceptable as it unfairly penalizes innocent students and demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and adherence to principles of individual accountability. Such an action would likely contravene university regulations regarding disciplinary actions, which typically require proof of individual wrongdoing. A third incorrect approach would be to leak the information about the alleged irregularities to the public or other students before a thorough investigation is complete. This breaches confidentiality, could cause undue panic and distress, and potentially prejudice the investigation, violating ethical standards of discretion and fairness. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence, adherence to established procedures, and ethical considerations. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the report. 2. Initiating a confidential and impartial investigation based on the specific allegations. 3. Consulting and strictly following the Anhui Medical University's examination regulations and disciplinary guidelines. 4. Gathering and analyzing evidence objectively. 5. Making decisions based solely on verified facts and established rules. 6. Communicating any actions taken through official channels, respecting the privacy of individuals involved. Question 18. The audit findings indicate potential irregularities in the administration of a recent Anhui Medical University entrance examination, specifically concerning the secure handling of examination papers and the consistent application of marking schemes across different assessment centers. As a faculty member involved in the examination process, you have been privy to some of these findings. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for Anhui Medical University entrance examinations? Option A. Privately discuss the audit findings with colleagues outside the official examination committee to gauge their opinions and potential solutions before taking any formal action. Option B. Disregard the audit findings, assuming they are minor or unsubstantiated, and continue with the standard post-examination procedures without further investigation or reporting. Option C. Immediately report the audit findings and any confirmed irregularities to the designated University Examination Oversight Committee, providing all supporting documentation and adhering to the university's established protocol for reporting such matters. Option D. Independently initiate a review of the marking schemes and attempt to regrade papers from the affected assessment centers without consulting or informing the University Examination Oversight Committee. Correct answer is C. Immediately report the audit findings and any confirmed irregularities to the designated University Examination Oversight Committee, providing all supporting documentation and adhering to the university's established protocol for reporting such matters. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between academic integrity, the university's reputation, and the ethical obligations of the faculty. The audit findings, if accurate, suggest a systemic issue that could undermine the credibility of Anhui Medical University's entrance examinations. The faculty member is faced with a decision that requires careful judgment to uphold ethical standards while navigating institutional pressures or potential repercussions. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to the established examination regulations of Anhui Medical University. This means meticulously reviewing the audit findings, gathering all relevant documentation, and reporting any confirmed irregularities through the designated official channels within the university. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it prioritizes the integrity of the examination process, which is paramount for fair selection of candidates and maintaining public trust in the university. Anhui Medical University's regulations would undoubtedly mandate reporting of such issues to prevent future occurrences and ensure fairness. An incorrect approach of ignoring the audit findings or attempting to conceal them would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This would violate the principles of academic integrity and potentially breach university policies regarding examination security and reporting of irregularities. Such inaction could lead to the perpetuation of unfair practices, damage the university's reputation, and expose the individual to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach would be to unilaterally alter examination procedures or results without proper authorization or a clear, documented process. This bypasses established protocols and could be seen as an attempt to manipulate outcomes, further compromising the integrity of the examination and violating university regulations. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the audit findings with unauthorized individuals, such as other faculty members not involved in the audit or external parties, before a formal investigation and resolution. This breaches confidentiality, could lead to misinformation, and undermines the official investigation process, violating university policies on information handling and internal reporting. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding and adhering strictly to Anhui Medical University's examination regulations and ethical codes of conduct. 2. Prioritizing the integrity and fairness of the examination process above all else. 3. Gathering all facts and evidence objectively. 4. Utilizing established internal reporting mechanisms for any suspected irregularities. 5. Maintaining confidentiality and professional discretion throughout the process. 6. Seeking guidance from appropriate university authorities if unsure about the correct procedure. Question 19. Examination of the data shows that during the Anhui Medical University entrance examination, a student approaches the invigilator during a break and discreetly asks if they can borrow a copy of the exam paper to review for a few minutes, stating they are struggling with a particular section and want to ensure they understand the concepts before the next part begins. Option A. Ignore the student's request and continue with invigilation duties without acknowledging their statement. Option B. Immediately confiscate the student's belongings and escort them out of the examination hall for attempting to obtain unauthorized access to exam materials. Option C. Politely but firmly explain to the student that the examination materials are strictly confidential and cannot be shared or reviewed outside of the designated examination period, and remind them of the university's policies on academic integrity. Option D. Agree to let the student briefly review the exam paper in a controlled environment to help them understand the concepts, emphasizing that this is a one-time exception. The correct answer is C. Politely but firmly explain to the student that the examination materials are strictly confidential and cannot be shared or reviewed outside of the designated examination period, and remind them of the university's policies on academic integrity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived academic need and the university's established policies regarding academic integrity and the proper use of examination materials. The pressure to perform well in a high-stakes entrance exam, coupled with the desire to secure a place in a competitive program at Anhui Medical University, can lead students to consider unethical shortcuts. Careful judgment is required to uphold academic standards while addressing the student's situation appropriately. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the student, explaining the university's strict policies against the unauthorized possession or distribution of examination materials. This approach aligns with the Anhui Medical University's regulatory framework for entrance examinations, which emphasizes fairness, integrity, and the prevention of academic misconduct. By addressing the student's request directly and explaining the consequences of violating these regulations, the invigilator upholds the principles of academic honesty and ensures a level playing field for all candidates. This also serves as a crucial educational moment for the student, reinforcing the importance of ethical conduct in their academic journey. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the student's request or to dismiss it without explanation. This failure to address the student's inquiry directly could be interpreted as tacit approval or a lack of vigilance, undermining the integrity of the examination process. Another incorrect approach would be to agree to the student's request, even if done with the intention of being helpful or avoiding conflict. This would constitute a direct violation of the Anhui Medical University's examination regulations, which strictly prohibit the sharing or unauthorized possession of examination content. Such an action would compromise the fairness of the exam and could lead to severe disciplinary actions for both the student and the invigilator. A third incorrect approach would be to report the student without first attempting to understand the context or to educate them on the rules. While reporting misconduct is sometimes necessary, a more constructive initial step, especially in a university entrance exam context, is to clarify expectations and policies. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Recognizing the potential ethical and regulatory implications of the student's statement. 2. Prioritizing adherence to the Anhui Medical University's established examination regulations and principles of academic integrity. 3. Engaging in clear, direct, and professional communication with the student to explain the rules and consequences. 4. Documenting the interaction and any subsequent actions taken in accordance with university procedures. 5. Seeking guidance from university authorities if the situation is complex or requires interpretation of policy. Question 20. Assessment of a medical student's understanding of patient rights and physician responsibilities when obtaining consent for a minor surgical procedure, considering the specific legal and ethical framework governing medical practice in China. A patient, Mr. Lai, is scheduled for a routine appendectomy. The attending physician briefly explains the procedure to Mr. Lai, who nods in agreement. The student observes this interaction. Which of the following best reflects the appropriate ethical and legal standard for informed consent in this context, as expected for the Anhui Medical University entrance exam? Option A. Proceeding with the surgery after a brief explanation, assuming that as a common procedure Mr. Lai implicitly understands the implications. Option B. Ensuring Mr. Lai fully understands the procedure, its potential risks, benefits, and alternatives, and that his consent is voluntary and documented according to Chinese medical regulations. Option C. Prioritizing the efficient scheduling of the operating room by obtaining consent quickly, even if a detailed explanation is not fully provided. Option D. Relying on Mr. lies nod as sufficient indication of his understanding and agreement, as he appears to comprehend the situation. The correct answer is B. Ensuring Mr. Lai fully understands the procedure, its potential risks, benefits, and alternatives, and that his consent is voluntary and documented according to Chinese medical regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a medical student preparing for the Anhui Medical University entrance exam. The core difficulty lies in accurately recalling and applying specific knowledge relevant to the exam's curriculum, particularly concerning the ethical and legal considerations within the Chinese healthcare system. Misinterpreting or misapplying these principles can lead to incorrect answers, reflecting a lack of preparedness for the rigorous standards of medical education in China. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the principles of informed consent as mandated by Chinese medical regulations and ethical guidelines. This includes ensuring the patient fully comprehends the nature of the procedure, its risks, benefits, and alternatives, and that their decision is voluntary and free from coercion. The student must demonstrate knowledge of the specific documentation requirements and the patient's right to refuse treatment, as outlined in relevant Chinese laws and university-specific guidelines for medical ethics. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of the procedure without adequately addressing the patient's understanding and consent fails to meet the ethical and legal requirements of informed consent in China. This overlooks the patient's autonomy and right to make informed decisions about their health care. An approach that assumes the patient's consent based on their demeanor or a brief explanation, without actively verifying comprehension and addressing all concerns, is a critical failure. This demonstrates a lack of diligence in ensuring true informed consent, potentially violating patient rights and leading to ethical breaches. An approach that prioritizes the physician's or institution's convenience over the patient's right to a comprehensive explanation and time to consider their options is ethically unsound and legally problematic under Chinese medical law. This approach undermines the patient-doctor relationship and the fundamental principle of patient-centered care. Professional reasoning. Medical students preparing for entrance exams must adopt a systematic approach to knowledge acquisition and application. This involves not only memorizing facts, but also understanding the underlying principles and their practical implications within the specific regulatory framework of China. When faced with a question, the student should first identify the core medical or ethical issue, then consider the relevant Chinese laws, regulations, and ethical codes applicable to that issue. They should then evaluate each potential answer against these established standards, prioritizing the option that most accurately reflects the legal and ethical obligations within the Chinese healthcare context. This process ensures a robust understanding and application of knowledge, crucial for success in the Anhui Medical University entrance exam.